Good evening and welcome to Recovery Church. It's Friday the 5th of March and we're so happy to have you all join us tonight. Tonight we have Michael Kane joining us. Some of you will know Michael as he grew up in Parkhead. He's now the student chaplain at NTC Manchester, but he's also a pastor at Brooklands Church of the Nazarene. Michael will be speaking to us on the subject of mental health, which we know has been an issue for many people over lockdown. So Michael, thank you for joining us. We're really looking forward to what you have to say. Let's remind ourselves of why we do Recovery Church. The preamble says this. Recovery Church meets today because a group of people realised that being willing to share their experience of life and hope can help them and help others grow in life and hope too. This is especially the case for those of us who have admitted that we are powerless to a particular substance or way of life. Recovery Church believes that all of us are recovering from something. For some, that has meant recovery from an addiction to a particular substance and pattern of living. For others, it simply means recovering from life with its hurts, habits, and hang-ups, life that at times has seemed empty and hopeless. Recovery Church is not a substitute for other groups and fellowships. We encourage our people to remain in these groups. Rather, we are here to help one another explore a shared belief that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to life, peace, and sanity. We believe that our recovery is strengthened as we come to know God and as we turn our will and life over to Him every day. Recovery Church, therefore, focuses on exploring and discovering the power of faith, hope, and love with others who want to know this power greater than ourselves. But Recovery Church is a church. It is a spiritual home and lifestyle that seeks to understand and know God through Jesus Christ. It is a Christian church in which we are all welcome, whether with faith, other faith, or no faith. Our primary purpose is to help people find life and freedom in faith, hope, and love with others who long for the same. Welcome to Recovery Church.
I see the stars, I hear the mighty thunder, thy power throughout the universe display. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! Went through the wood and forest glades I wander and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! And when I think that God His Son not sparing sent Him to die, I scarce can take it in. on the cross, my burden gladly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then shall I bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
Good evening, folks. My name is Mick Kane. I'm a pastor down here in Manchester. I pastor Brooklands Church of the Nazarene, which is in the Wythenshawe area of Manchester. I'm also a chaplain at Nazarene Theological College, where I look after some of the students here. I do a little bit of teaching in the subject of prayer. And also as part of that role, I'm a mental health first aid instructor. I teach people the basics on mental health and identifying some of the symptoms of mental ill health, as well as offering some support and encouragement of how people can make some changes to their life and benefit from those changes mentally. But I want to say, underneath all that and at the heart of everything I am, first and foremost, I think I'm a Parkhead boy. All right. I grew up around the corner from Parkhead Nazarene. I grew up going to the church as well. And so it's always a privilege and an honour when I'm invited to come and talk and share and reflect in any way, shape or form. So it's a privilege of mine to be with you this evening as part of Recovery Church. I wonder if you were watching a few months back when Scotland qualified for the European Championships. I mean, let's face it, it's probably been one of the highlights of the whole past year for us in Scotland, isn't it? We're playing against Serbia, really, really good side, but we played really well, took the lead, looked like we had it in the bag, but then they equalised with the last minute, and every single one of us thought to ourselves, oh, here we go again, we've done a Scotland, another glorious failure. All right, but that knocked it into extra time, and it was backs to the wall for the whole of extra time. I was watching it from behind my sofa, and we got to the end of extra time, and that meant penalties. And penalties, when you're a football fan, is just a nightmare. It's a lottery. It could go either way. So it was a really, really tense few moments. And even when Scotland qualified, even when David Marshall made that save, you remember we still weren't sure for a few seconds. The camera cut to David Marshall and he was looking at the referee. Was he going to call that he was off his line? And then the ref blew the whistle, and then it was elation. We'd done it. We'd qualified for our first tournament in 22 years. It's the first time Scotland have been in a major tournament since I was 12 years old. It was fantastic. But as amazing as that feeling was, I mean, I've watched Scotland for all of those 22 years in between, and you need to admit it's been a real struggle at times, hasn't it? We've watched Scotland play dreadfully in some of those matches. We've seen them play quite well too. We've even seen them get close at times, only to blow it at the last minute. It's a real struggle at times following Scotland as a football fan, isn't it? Now, why am I talking about football at the start of my talk? Hopefully I've not lost too many people. People want to skip this part of the talk. But the reason I'm talking about being a Scottish football fan is because I think it's a good analogy for life in general sometimes. The ups and downs of being a Scottish football fan is related, I think, to just the ups and downs of everyday life. Life is full of changeable moments, isn't it? All of us could point to times in our life where we've experienced real sadness and despair. We've experienced difficulty and pain and all of the emotions that go with them. And at the same time, all of us could point to moments in our life where we felt the opposite. We felt celebration, joy, we were ecstatic, elated. All right, life is full of changeable moments. But the thing I want us to think about for the next few moments this evening is, how do we maintain a sense of sanity in the changeable seasons of life? Life is full of ups and downs, isn't it? And what, if anything, can the Bible tell us about these things? Now, you might call it mental health, mental well-being, resilience, self-care. Terms like mental health, well-being, self-care don't appear in the Bible, or at least they don't appear in the same way that we talk about them today. But I want you to know that that doesn't mean that they weren't important back then. And it certainly doesn't mean that they are not important to God. In fact, if you dig deep enough, you're able to find a whole host of stuff that relates to mental health in the scriptures. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine." Philippians 4 verse 6 almost commands us not to be anxious about anything. Romans 8 verse 6 says to set the mind on the Spirit is peace and life. Then there are some individuals that appear in the scripture that seem to really wrestle with some of the same things that we might wrestle with regards to mental health. Jeremiah, a prophet in the Old Testament, some people call him the despondent prophet. He makes some really worrying statement at times. He says at one point, "Oh, cursed be the day that I was born. Cursed be the man who told my father that I was born." This is really worrying language, I think, if we're looking at it in the context of mental health. There's certainly signs of depression here. You might even think that's language indicating suicide. Elijah is another famous prophet. You can read all about him in the book of 1 Kings. But in 1 Kings chapter 19, there's a specific incident regarding Elijah. Elijah goes through a real traumatic experience. He challenges the king of the day, particularly with regards to the worship of other gods. And as a result of this, he's threatened with his life. And it's a real and true threat. And you can tell that Elijah's scared. He's traumatized by this. And he uses similar language to Jeremiah. He lies under a tree and prays that God would just take his life away. But there's another statement that Elijah uses that really sticks out to me. Twice in the story, he says, "I'm the only one left. There's no one else. I'm the only one left." How often have we gone through difficult circumstances in our life and we've felt like we're the only one left? We've got no one to support us. All right, Elijah seems to be really wrestling with this, even though God says you're not the only one left. There's thousands of other prophets just like you. And God blesses him by telling him to go and anoint Elisha. He gives him a friend. But Elijah really struggling, I think, with his mental health, feeling this sense of isolation. I am the only one left. But it's Jesus that I really want us to focus on this evening. If you were to read the start of Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 1, you would see that there are at least a couple of things Jesus does here that I think can inform us of what it looks like to really look after our emotional well-being or our mental health. Now, Mark's Gospel is quite unique in that it starts really, really fast-paced. Mark's Gospel's shorter than the other Gospels, and that means that it's quite quick. There's a sense of urgency in Mark's Gospel, and it starts in Mark chapter 1, and Jesus is involved in a whole host of things. Really, really busy start. But Jesus, the first thing he does in Mark chapter 1, one of the first things he does is really, really important. He calls himself followers, friends along the way. He calls himself disciples. He asks a group of individuals if they'll come and follow him and walk this life's journey with him. Now, I find that fascinating because Jesus probably could have achieved everything he did on this earth on his own. I don't think Jesus needed anyone else. So isn't it fascinating that the first thing he does, one of the first things he does, is surround himself with friends? You see, even though Jesus could have achieved all these things on his own, he knew that that wasn't the best way. Jesus knew that human beings weren't created to do things on their own. Human beings were created for relationships, for friendships. We were created for connection. So isn't it amazing then that one of the first things that Jesus does is calls himself disciples, followers, friends for the journey along the way. In fact, later on in Mark's Gospel in chapter 3, we're told the reason why Jesus calls disciples. It says that he calls them first and foremost simply that they might be with him. It's as simple as that. And as simple as that is, I think that's really powerful and profound. Jesus knows the importance of connection, relationships, friendships. That's why he calls this group of followers, this group of friends. Friendships are so important. Having other people in our lives is so important. We weren't created to live this life in isolation. And Jesus knew this. Without others, we become isolated, lonely, and this is not good for our mental health. And so the challenge we face right now then is this. In this season of distancing, how do we maintain a sense of connection? That's really important for us to think through as it has implications for our mental health. But then after Jesus calls disciples, he gets busy. I told you Mark's Gospel was busy. We're told that Jesus begins to preach. He heals people. He travels all over the area. He casts out demons. It's a really, really busy time for Jesus. But then in the middle of the story, just in verse 35, we're told that Jesus gets up really early and disappears. He goes off on his own. And his disciples get up and they can't find him. And so they go looking for him. And when they find him, they're almost annoyed at Jesus. They say to him, Jesus, everybody's looking for you. All right, there's this sense, Jesus, people are dependent on you. They need you. Now's not the time for you to be heading off all on your own. People are looking for you, Jesus. It's almost like this sense that there's work to be done. Why would you just vanish, Jesus? I wonder if you've ever fallen into the trap that you can't take some time off because there's work to be done, because everyone's looking for you. I know that I certainly have. In fact, if I reflect on this bit of the story, I often think about how I might respond to people saying to me, Michael, everyone's looking for you. You see, I think I normally respond to that in one of two ways. The first thing I tend to think is this: yes, everybody's looking for me. That must mean I'm doing something right. That means I'm needed. That's good. I better go back then. I better go back to these people because they really need me. That's sometimes the first way I would respond to this statement. Secondly, the second way I would respond to this at times is I would think, everybody's looking for me. Oh no, it's really heavy. I feel the stress of the situation, but reluctantly and heavily, I'll go back into the situation. Why? Because everybody's looking for me, right? But isn't it fascinating to compare this with the way that Jesus reacts to this situation? He isn't influenced by the same things that I am influenced by. In fact, his response is fascinating. He says, everybody's looking for me. That means it's time to move on to the next town. Wait, what? It's time to move on. Jesus isn't influenced by the busyness of the situation. He isn't influenced by the duty of the situation. He's only influenced by the task in hand, which is to spread the gospel around the region. So if I'm in Jesus' shoes here, because everyone needs me, the gospel doesn't make it very far. But because Jesus knows the importance of time off, time alone, to reevaluate the things that are important, the gospel as a result goes further. You see, there's permission right here in the text that even in the midst of busyness, time off and time alone is so important. Rest changes our perspective on things. Rest brings us back to ourselves. Are we resting enough? You see, for some of us, this past year has been extra stressful, hasn't it? With all the added things going on, a pandemic, all the extra pressures about our physical health, all the changes in some of the work that we're involved in, the inability to connect with our friends and our family in the same way. And sometimes when life is extra stressful, we can make the mistake of not allowing ourselves time off, not allowing ourselves time to rest, when this actually, in the midst of busyness, is often the most important thing. Do you know what it's a bit like? It's a bit like that instruction on an aeroplane. I wonder if you've been on an aeroplane and you know there's those instructions at the beginning that everybody ignores. Well, as part of those instructions, there's the instruction that if the pressure in the cabin is to drop, oxygen masks will fall from the compartment above you. All right. And then there's this instruction: if you're traveling with a child, be sure to put your own oxygen mask on before you help your child. Now, if you're a parent, or even if you're just a decent human being, you might think that's counterintuitive, right? Surely our instinct is to help the child first before we help ourselves. However, once we understand that actually a change in cabin pressure can mean that within 10 seconds we can faint from the lack of oxygen, then it's important to know that unless we put our oxygen mask on first, then we're not going to be any good to help anyone. And if there's a child struggling and we're passed out, no one's going to get help. So what do we need to do first? Put on our own oxygen mask. Rest is a little bit like this. Even when we're busy, even when people are depending on us. You see, if we burn out, we're no good to no one and no one gets help. But if we take the time to rest, the time to be alone, the time to reevaluate, the time to change our perspective, then we're in a better position to help people and people get the best of us. Boy, it's been a strange year, hasn't it? There are some people who believed that we were on the cusp of a mental health crisis, even before the coronavirus pandemic. And so the experiences of the last year have only just accelerated things. That makes the things that we are talking about and reflecting on tonight really, really important. It's important that we think about these things. But I want you to know this before we move on to a time where we talk about real practical application here. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking that God isn't concerned for your mental health. Remember, we're told to love God with all our heart, all our soul, all our strength, and all of our mind. God wants a healthy mind for each and every single one of us.
all these pieces, broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed, but not forsaken. I've been set free. I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. You take our failure, you take our weakness, you set your treasure in jars of clay. So take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel, the world to see your life in me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life.
See, looking after our mental health is a bit like looking after any aspect of our health. But I find it quite useful to make the comparison to looking after our physical health. You see, if I want to get fitter or if I want to lose weight, it's one thing me knowing all the benefits of these things. It's even another thing me knowing how I might go about getting fitter or how I might change my diet in order that I might receive those benefits. But the truth is this: unless I actually put my trainers on and get outside and make those changes, I'm not going to see a difference. You see, it's the same with mental health. We can talk about these things, and actually talking in and of itself can really make a difference. But there are specific things that we can do that over time can help us look after our mental health. And just to close this evening, I've got 7 tips for looking after your own mental health, particularly during lockdown. The first one is this: get up. You see, one of the traps that we can fall into when our routines are all over the place is staying in our beds too long. Sleep is so important to our mental health. Our mental health can be affected if we don't sleep enough, but it can also be affected if we sleep too much. So it's important that we pick a time to get out of bed and get out of bed at the same time every single day. And if we get up at the same time every day, we'll find our bodies getting tired at the same time every day, and it'll be easier for us to fall asleep. So the first thing we need to do is get up. Make sure we're not staying in bed too long. The second thing is this: get into a routine. Now, this is linked to the first point, but it's important that we find a rhythm to our day, because our body and our mind needs those reference points throughout the day that just keeps us at our best. So as well as getting up at the same time every day, we want to do other little things that just helps our minds and our body understand where we are throughout the course of our day. It might be that we find the time to eat at the same time every day. It might be that we find a time to pray at the same time every day, but find something of a routine and a rhythm. And it is shown that people that stick to routines and rhythm benefit their mental health. Get into a routine. Number 3, get outside. Now, thankfully, the weather's getting better, isn't it? It's starting to get brighter outside. Now, I don't want to bore you, but one of the main ways that our bodies get vitamin D is through exposure to sunlight. And vitamin D is so important for our mental health. And so at the brightest part of the day, which is often around lunchtime, try and be outdoors. Try and expose your skin to sunlight and expose your eyeballs to light. And over time, you'll find this makes a huge difference in regulating our hormones, but also regulating and stabilising our mental health. Get outside. Number 4, get out of breath. Get some exercise. Now, I'm not saying you need to train for a marathon or anything like that. All you need to do is push your body just a little bit more every single day. And if you're not used to exercise, then start with a walk. If you're good at walking, maybe progress to a run. But it is clinically proven that exercise has a huge effect on stabilising our mental health. So try and do something every single day that will help you get out of breath. Number 5, get offline. Now, one of the major changes to my life because of the pandemic and the restrictions, it means that everything moved online. From support groups to a lot of my meetings at work, everything now takes place in front of a phone screen or a computer screen. Now, in one way this has been helpful to keep us better connected, but on the other side, I think there's a real disadvantage to this. The light that goes into your eyeballs from the screens can actually have a negative effect on some of the other things that we were talking about, some of the kind of vitamin D hormones and stuff that we have in our body. So it's important that we don't spend too much time staring at a screen every day. Social media as well can keep us connected, but social medias are designed in such a way to make our bodies release dopamine, and that can make them addictive. And so it's important that we are not spending too much time staring at our phone, staring at our computer screen. So make sure that we find the time to get offline, unplug, get offline. Number 6, get in touch. Now, we spoke about this earlier, didn't we? The importance of remaining connected to other people. Now, I know that that's hard right now because of restrictions, but there are creative ways that we can connect with people, and it doesn't need to be online either. Go for a walk with someone, pick up the phone and speak to someone. Maybe you might want to write an email or a letter. Remember those? We could even do that to remain connected. It's important that we don't fall into the trap of becoming isolated in these days, because as we've already spoke about, this is detrimental to our mental health. So let's make extra efforts to get in touch. What you might want to do is get in touch with someone that you haven't spoken to for such a long time. Arrange to meet them and go for a walk. Get in touch. And then finally, number 7, get on your knees. Now, there are, of course, other ways that you can pray. You don't need to be on your knees to pray, but it was just a nice finish, I think, to all my little practical tips. But the important point here is prayer. Remain connected to God. It has been proven that individuals with faith tend to have a more stable mental health than those without. Some studies reflect that. And so it's important, and I think a lot of us who have been involved in recovery know this, it's important for us to recognise that there are many things in this world that we can't control. And so it's important for us to have faith and connection with a being who we believe is in control and remains in control. And in a season where everything seems to be changing, it's so refreshing and so healthy to remain connected to a God who doesn't change. So build that into your routine, build that into some of the other steps that we've spoken about. Get on your knees, spend time in prayer, and reap the benefits. And so there you have it. 7 tips for looking after our mental health, particularly during lockdown. Get up, get into a routine, get outside, get out of breath, get offline, get in touch, and get on your knees. Now, here's the thing. Not one of these tips is a magic bullet. No one of these things on their own is going to be the one thing you'll do that will turn your mental health around. That's not how it works. But here's how it tends to work. If we can make all of these little small changes just a little bit, you'll find that the small changes add up. And as the small changes add up, we'll find that over time, with consistency, a big change can happen in our mental health. Thank you so much for having me along this evening.